Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It's amazing. And also putting which way you're facing at the coordinates helps a lot. So when you get to the coordinates, you know which way to look on the trail. So you need to I was just trying to make sure I didn't take the full projector down with me. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So those of you who have attended the SC Consortium meetings last year, thank you. Those of you who haven't, you are always welcome. I've received feedback saying, oh, well, I thought that, you know, since I didn't attend the first one, that I couldn't attend the rest. No, these are all drop in, come in if you can. If you can't come, that's okay. Come to the next one. And what we have been really focusing on are data standards. So let's see. So obviously, as you guys know, there's the digitization goal. You have your specimen and you want to get all of it onto CERNEC. And as Herrick discussed, CERNEC was originally made for fish. So there is some ambiguity that comes up. And how do we approach that as people who process herbarium data? So Symbiotic does have little help functions that you can put a little question mark and it will bring up some sort of data standard, including things from Darwin Core. Darwin Core is really, really important. It is not only what Symbiotic references, that is the export that comes from iNaturalist, and that is the export that goes from herbarium portals, whether it's CCH2, CERNEC, SciNet, iNaturalist. Darwin Core is what gets pulled out and gets put into GBIF. So go ahead. What is this yours? Oh, that's the next slide. Oh, that's really weird. No, this is yours.
Oh, okay. So these fields here are ones that we created or already supplemented standards for. We don't have time, unfortunately, today to talk about all of these, but we are going to talk about the skeletal data fields that we use and a couple more of the more ambiguous fields that are a bit variable in what we like to put or what boxes we like to put.
One caveat I wanted to put onto this that I don't think it's on the slide. Avery and I have been focusing a lot on vascular plants, but as we go through this and we do come to consensus on data standards, lichens and bryophytes have their own unique, and algae have their own unique quirks of things that show up on labels. And so we also want to start moving towards, okay, what are all the things that show up on those labels that we need to figure out where they go?
Okay. So collector name's the primary collector of the specimen, which you would think is easy enough. It's rare, but not unheard of as having a collector name. So these might seem simple initially to enter, but sorry, Cynthia. We don't really have a standard format that all collectors use, and even the collector themselves might change their name around or how they want to present it. Later, you can see when Cynthia got married, we also now include the hyphen of Smith, so that changes as well.
It doesn't have a problem.
For the name field, we choose to use the verbatim name to reduce the entry errors, and we also put this always in the format of last name, comma, first name, middle initial, and then if we have a suffix, we include that on the end as well, so like junior. This is going to preserve the way that the name was originally written. We did go back and forth on this a little bit, but we figured that this is the most simple way for people that are entering data to avoid errors. And so that when things like binomia come up, we can kind of aggregate all of those together and figure out who's who more easily. So this doesn't leave our data processors to have to do a lot of research to figure out who's who. If we don't have a collector name at all, which sometimes happens, we just enter the word unknown into the field. If we have a name that is incredibly abbreviated, as in 3 initials, we can later go back by admin and have someone that does recognize who this collector most likely is, or recognizes maybe this set of specimens and can batch edit that data back in. So for collector number, this is also another unique identifier from the primary collector. This is one of those things that, oh, I think I covered this one the last time, so sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry, guys. We're trying to swap off. But yeah, so the collector number, it's amazing to me in a really good way that collectors did have this unique identifier for their collections. And I'm talking like they have been used for centuries. They are wonderful. And again, you're like a number. How varied could it be? Very, very varied. So people do all sorts of different types of numbering. We add them verbatim except for commas. So the reason why that is, it's because if you when you search for a collector number in Cernic, at this moment in time, if you add like 10,100, it's going to search for collector number 10 and 100. So don't add commas in your collector numbers when you're adding them. If there is no, so leading zeros can and should be entered. A lot of collectors use those leading zeros for a reason, and it does not break the search term. So we just have decided that, okay, let's go ahead and put it all in there verbatim. Again, just not the commas. If there's no collection number, we put S.N. which stands for sem numero. There is a quirk here. So why do we put S.N. Why don't we just leave it blank? Well, a lot of times, if somebody's trying to, understand what's going on, they might be like, okay, is this record complete, or did somebody just leave it off? Because that does happen with data technicians, is, they will get through, or they get distracted, they get up, they go away. So has this record actually been covered? Yes, they looked for a kind of collector number and they were unable to find it. However, and we will talk about this later. Eric talked about it as well, or alluded to it. There is a duplicate management tool under Symbiota, and you can do a search for duplicates. Unfortunately, the way that works is that when you put in S.N. it will ask you to lump them together as unique or as duplicate collections. In which case, if you are doing this, we do ask that you contact Symbiota help. We talked about this with Katie in one of their Symbiota sessions. They are more than happy to guide you through that whenever you do the duplicate search tool to go back and remove all the S.N. duplicate matches. So this is one of those things where it's kind of hard to balance, right? Because you definitely want to indicate that the record is complete by putting S.N. But then when you're the duplicate search tool, there are some extra steps involved. I don't know, there might be plans in the future to address that in the duplicate search tool. I would imagine it's not too hard of a fix, but they have not addressed it at this moment in time. They have a lot to do. So that is just something to consider. But for now, we continue to do that because we think it's really important to indicate that the record has been completely searched.
So collection date is really simple. It is just the date the specimen was collected. And once again, we I'm Dr. Nelson. I'm pretty sure this bottom right one is you, by the way. But we have some variability here. And what our format is, though, is we have two verbatim fields here, or sorry, we have two fields here. One is verbatim, one is formatted. Our format is year, month, day, which is maybe confusing as a commonplace for us is month, day, year. So because of this, also verbatim, of course, exact verbatim, formatted is our format again. If we have something like June 1980, then we're going to use zeros as placeholders for that information. If we have no date, we're going to use zeros again as placeholders, but you know, it would just be 0000 dash 00 dash 00. So if we have a vague that is way too vague, a date that is way too vague, we're going to treat this again as no date. Sometimes we get some interesting ones where they may have started collecting on one date and continued to a further date. So you've got like a set range here. Sometimes they might have multiple dates and it's just, it was on this date and it was on this date, but it applies to this set of data. So what we do then is, Cernic actually includes this little pencil icon over here, which is kind of easy to overlook. But what you do is you enter the first date as the one for the date field. And then after that, the initial date will become converted into the day of the year for that. To find the second day of the year, we do use a converter for that, and then it just counts for the full range. So latest determination is easily the most current determination and most current scientific name for that specimen. These are saved in a separate table. You can use the primary tab or the skeletal data entry. I didn't include it here, but if you go back later for the dates, one thing that we have noticed that's important in Cernic is when you want to update the determinations, do not use the main portion of the form because it won't fully update everything else. You want to go to the secondary tab and then it will update the determination on the first page as well and keep the old information. Since our specimens are, well, curators know the importance of this because specimens are going to be filed physically according to their latest determination.
All right, country, state, and county. We run into this a lot. People put different ones, which are really cool to read because sometimes they put the country name as for older collections that no longer exist. This is very common in Europe. We don't particularly have this problem in the United States. It typically is always United States. But after discussions, we did talk to Katie Pearson about this. The official recommendation from Symbiota is to add the names as they appear in Getty Thesaurus. So people put, well, there's a trend where people want to be respectful of the country that they are, the specimens are from. And so, for example, Hungary, we don't call it Hungary, we call it Magyarország. So you might be tempted to put Magyarország on your label, but then nobody knows what that is. So it's nice, it looks nice on the label, but it needs to be put in as an integrated thesaurus. Non-matching names are added to the location remarks. And so that's just, again, a lot of what we were thinking about when we were talking about data standards is we're trying to keep as much of the verbatim information as possible. So we don't just want to delete it when we put it online. So if there's something that doesn't match the field, we want to have it represented somewhere on the record. So if they did put, España instead of Spain, then you would put that in location remarks, like the original name is España, but it's actually, you actually put Spain in the actual country. Whoops. Okay, yes, county, and state, always use the drop down. It becomes a problem. Sometimes people type too fast. We have lots of South Carolina specimens that are in South Dakota. And we have a lot of South Dakota specimens in South Carolina. So just something to consider, please, for data technicians, please be careful about that. And, don't put S. Caro. I process South Carolina specimens all the time, and there are many S. Caros that I can just stare sadly at because I don't have editing privileges and I can't fix it. But
UAE instead of USA.
or UAE, yes, the United Arab, what is it? Emirates, yeah, Arab. That is, yes, there are a lot of United States specimens there. As well. So, and as far as county, we don't put the CO dot or the word county. That's understood because it's the county field. So there's no reason to add those extra characters. A lot of the data standards that we go over, we're thinking about it from the perspective, okay, if someone wants to use your data and they want to download it, what is something that can be easily filtered out or cleaned up via code? CO dot and the word county can be easily taken out, but what we're also balancing is we're creating these data standards and trying to publish these into like a little data standards book to send out to you guys to make it easier on the students.
Mhm.
If you have clear cut rules and it's time to question, like, do I write CO? Do I put a dot after it? Do I capitalize it? Just eliminating the word county and eliminating that text eliminates that question. Just put the county, and also spell it right. We have issues here. It's very rare, but it does happen that, sometimes a collection will span counties. Now, this is something that happens, code gets updated. It used to be that you could stick a comma, and then if you searched one, then it would come up. So if I searched McDowell in McDowell, Yancey, then this field would pop up and it would have this record come up. I was testing this, it no longer works. So,
What does it do instead?
it does not, it
It
only
doesn't
brings up the
find
first one.
anything?
Oh, no,
It
no,
does find them.
it finds the first one, so it
Okay.
won't find Yancey. Sorry, good point.
So if you typed Yancey, it would not find that record? Okay.
Where did that happen?
They update it. I think it's to deal with the commas. I think it was working right before my presentation in May, and then I was double checking and now it's not working anymore.
Oh, I thought I was using it just fine the other day, but maybe I better make sure.
Right, so here's my question to the group, now that I have all these curators here. How do you want to handle counties with multiple, or like a record with multiple counties? Do you want to put just one of them in? Do you want to try to force both of them in? And understand that it's not gonna come up on search, because just because it doesn't come up on the search, when you download it, you'll still be able to find it in an Excel file.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, if you have the upper level geography, you can still display your records in a tabular format and sort based on county. So you just kind of moving your microscope out a little bit, you might still be able to discover it. The other thing I'll offer is that this issue is basically related to the fact that we're dealing with a database environment that sees the comma as an operator. So it's looking at it as an and or, and the code that they use to develop Symbiota that runs this, they may have just updated that to say, oh, no, don't treat the comma as an operator, or, look at a verbatim string in quotes or something like that. And that is an issue that even if we agree upon a standard now, could potentially change if they try to adapt the code to accommodate this issue.
I mean, in general, what I was gonna suggest, this is a very unique situation, by the way, because it sits right on the county. I feel like more often than not, it's like most of it is like a large portion of the uncertainty is in one county and then like a little bit is in another county. In which case I would recommend with the most area is what would go into the field.
We have the issue with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. If something's right on the 18, if you're hiking north, it was on the right side, and it's in Tennessee. North Carolina, it's in Tennessee. Because we're the University of North Carolina Herbarium. If it says Tennessee and North Carolina, I put it in North Carolina. But then down in the locality field, I'll put, TN hyphen NC, whatever. And figure if somebody's really interested, they'll dig down there. So yeah, and if it's a county record in one, then I'll put it in that county. If it's common as dirt in one county and uncommon in the other, I'll put it in the uncommon ones that at least it gets found. Yeah, it's a judgment call. But I mean, cities span counties. I was wondering why in 1890 W.W. Ash, who I hate for naming these. Why he always put things that he went to this one place all the time and he said it was in one county and I was like, dude, it's clearly in this other county. And I just learned that county was not made until. Right, so he was actually right, because he was where he was, but the county line changed, so, yes.
Yeah, and actually, here's the other thing, once we get really good at georeferencing too, a lot of this can go away, because then you can run the coordinates through and do intersections with county lines. And I'm so glad that you brought up the historical county. I don't have it for North Carolina, but if you do go to herbarium.org, we did post a link to an interactive map of South Carolina that will show you how the counties changed over time. And you
could have depressed me.
But you can, but I often will double check the dates and I will look back. And you can actually download it as a shapefile. So for those of you who are proficient with GIS, you can download it as a shapefile and you can run it through your records. I was actually kind of surprised. One of the bigger things is that Ravenel had a lot of collections in Aiken before Aiken County was Aiken County, but it's okay because it's in today's Aiken County. So it all worked out. But yeah, there is, I did provide that resource, and Avery did get that up there. So if you are working in South Carolina georeferencing, that is something that you can reference. So I'm sorry, we were back and forth. These fields that we just covered, the skeletal data, last year, Carol Ann helped us with the collector name, Eric, and Katie helped us with the collector number. These are the kind of ones that we're kind of hoping we will all follow going forward because it really helps us. Again, data quality is really important. Remember, all of this data is being carried up to data aggregators. And so being standard, if possible, it will carry through and it will cause less errors and less flags on GBIF. Curators, there are pamphlets in your bags that have these data standards in pamphlet form. Students, there are extra pamphlets over there with Hannah. So if you want to pick one up on your way out, it is written down. And now we wanted to talk about high ambiguity fields. So what that means is, again, because we don't have time to go through all of them, but these are the ones that Avery and I found caused a lot of discussion, and you are all here to talk about it. So
this one gives me the worst headache of most of them. So let's start with the Darwin core standards of how this is defined first, because it's a little bit funky. So I actually have to have it written down. Depth in meters is the range of depth below the local surface, but the verbatim depth is the original verbatim description of the depth below the local surface at which the specimen was collected. So right now we're looking at having it as depth of the water that the plant was collected in. Since we had Herrick help us kind of figure out a standard for this, and mostly at this point, we're just applying it to vascular plants, because if we jump into aquatics, it's another can of worms. So we write it exactly as it appears. We use min and max in meters. If we have only one depth, it goes into minimum, nothing in maximum. I believe, Cernic will actually give you an error if you try to just put something just straight in maximum because there's no minimum. And if they're under 1 meter, you leave it blank because Cernic also will just change it to 0. Unfortunately. For Phenology, we are still trying to figure this one out a little bit. This is yours.
Yeah, so about this. People use all sorts of abbreviations, they capitalize it all sorts of different ways. Part of it is you can do a search for, any different way. If people, the big question is, some people do flowering and fruiting, and some people do flowering, fruiting. If you look at the current, trait scoring that they have, this is actually in Cernic portal, so you can use this. They just have reproductive, sterile, and not scoreable. So, but CCH2, where I don't know if Lindsay is on the Zoom, but CCH2 is kind of where they try new stuff. And they have all of these traits. Unopened flower, open flower, senesced flower, and then fruit and sterile and not scoreable. So I think the goal is to eventually have these pop up here. Cause it says Phenology version 1. So I don't know if you guys want to go ahead when you're entering data, or as botanists are entering data, if you want to go ahead and start using these terms on your on your portal or on your labels, or do we separate them with a comma? Go ahead.
What happens when you have a plant that flowers and fruits over a month or two, and so you got a plant that's got buds, full flower, and maturing fruits all on the same branch?
Then I think you separate it by comma, right?
Well, but
I think
are
so.
we talking about this environment?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that would be scored.
Are you limited?
I mean, so that, I think the idea here is if you check reproductive, and this is the CCH2 portal, it'll automatically populate all of the checkboxes beneath that are indented. And then if none are present, like, if you don't have fruit, you can, check that as not there or something like that. So I think this is just an expansion of the reproductive condition that you see in the Cernic portal currently, in that they usually have 3 radio buttons where it's reproductive, sterile, or not scoreable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
So,
just trying to figure out how
in this,
that-
in this.
And then
sense-
you may,
You can check.
the collector may not put anything in the description, but then as you look at the plant, you can clearly see that you've got all components.
Right.
And I did want to bring this to you guys' attention because this, I mean, we have a huge problem with this where students don't know the phenology. So if
Right.
you do know the phenology, this will serve you just images and just the phenology field. So if you are interested in a specific species, or you have a student or a graduate student who actually can tell if it's reproductive or not, you can just not even have, I mean, UNCH doesn't even tell the students to do the phenology. They leave that blank unless indicated, because it causes a lot of confusion. And so, I mean, I think what Avery and I have always said is no, don't fill in phenology, basically, because it's gonna be wrong. But thankfully, they set this up so that experts can go through and score it.
So we have been talking about this in the meetings. What about ferns? I know that they have to be in a different portal. I don't know what other collections are doing, but we still have them in this portal. So let's say that we take ferns out of the picture.
Okay.
What happens with gymnosperms?
Great question.
Because that will not fit them, right?
That's right.
Would, I mean, reproductive.
Reproductive, but then.
Yeah, but
You
then
don't have
there's no
to-
descriptor in that expanded version that would apply to gymnosperms.
So then we need to email.
Yeah.
And let them know.
Fruit.
How about gymnast
They don't
firms?
have, they have now.
Hannah,
No, I mean,
2-year
I'm
pens.
not-
Oh,
I'm
you're,
agreeing.
you're great. It's like. It's for me.
You want to see if I got fern, I put fertile or sterile, and that's all I put.
well, I was gonna say, if we come up collectively with it as a group of the
can-
list, we can, you know, work with them or talk to them about
But are
that.
these things not already out there? And the reason I asked this, I remember years ago going to an iDig Bio workshop at Berkeley, where they were trying to do this very thing to figure out the vocabulary. And they had all these scientists from not just botanists, but all sorts of folks there trying to figure out what's the appropriate language. How do we, and it might be that that's what the California Phenology one is, because I was Googling the CCH2 and found that. So I guess my question is, are we just trying to reinvent the wheel, or has somebody else already solved these types of problems where we could sort of piggyback off of what someone else has already done?
I don't know about these in particular.
Well, if you want to answer one of your questions, trait angiosperm phenological traits.
Mhm.
So that kind of like throws the ferns, and Jim
Right.
turns out.
So do they have a separate option for?
Oh, okay.
So that's where I am at.
I guess we have, some data representative online. Hi, Lindsay.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So I was just going to say, so I don't think this is going to be implemented in CERNEC that I know of. It was implemented in CCH2 as part of the CAP TCN, but like obviously those traits are already worked out. This would be a really good question for Katie, because I don't know if it might require like a contract to bring these kinds of traits over into SINET. The other thing is, if you were to implement these traits, it wouldn't just affect CERNEC, it would affect I believe the entire SINET portal network, because it's using the same database in the back end. So that's a consideration. So if people have been using the core data in the portal, that would be like probably a data migration task that would have to happen as part of this. But it's good to know this is something you all are thinking about, and I can bring this back to our team just to let them know.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
That question, well, I know that CCH2 sometimes has different stuff, so I was like not sure. Because this screenshot is from CCH2, it's not from CERNET.
I have another word of caution about phenology. The stupid but obvious example is flowering dogwood. You know, people will see the big bracts, they're like, that's flower, but that's flowers, right? So, I tend to be very cautious when entering, this kind of stuff. I usually only enter that kind of stuff if somebody needs it and requests it. And then I usually tell them, you look at it and you decide and you score it. I'll give you editorial rights because they know more of what they're looking for than I do.
I really like that point, and that's why I really like this. So thank you to this invited team for bringing this to CERNEC, because yeah, in general, volunteers and most of the student data tax, it's nothing. I mean, y'all are all great and you do a great job, but you might not know what the phenology is. It's just best to leave it to people who have more experience with that. And I know Gary's on here as well. I don't know if the Lichen portal has any desire to come up with separate. I don't think I've seen any drop-down menus. It's just to fill in for reproductive status, but they do have different terms. Actually, I'll look into that and see if they actually get that published. They do have
This was it was an NSF sponsored thing.
yeah.
I think it predates some of these sites that you're referencing, so it may be that all of that went into some of those things. The woman who was leading it, I want to say her name was Jen, but I don't remember her last name. Is that, you know who that is?
Yost.
Yes, Yeah, that's who it was.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a paper actually. Oh,
There's
we
none.
have a paper. Oh my God, there's a paper on this, Jill, and I'm on it.
And the ontologies are.
Perfect.
Oh my gosh.
We can put
Okay.
that as a list
That's crazy.
to like the data standards to be following this, because I think you can write in the notes. So if you want to follow those data standards and you are a botanist who is filling in this phenology, they did a great job making a list. So follow the list. I guess that will solve that problem with phenology, basically. As far as multiple, I think separating by comma makes the most sense. Because that's the best you can do. But all of them should be on there and they should be separated by a comma. Okay, so I think this is yours.
Yeah. We brought this up in our most recent meeting back in April, but we're still also working on the best standards for it. I think we talked about using the alt key code here for male and female. I think it was Herrick that brought up that we're not exactly sure what that would do if you tried to search for it, but you will see it. On that top example, they have simply to indicate the sex of the plant, just drawn the female symbol instead of typing it out. Sometimes people do fully write it out. I think Lorena brought up that it's like both reproductive parts could be present, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily functional. So we're still trying to figure out exactly how to work with this. At this point, we're just, if we leave it blank unless the collector specifically specifies this. Any other mention would just go into the description. Right here, this line, he mentions both female and male shrubs. So at that point, we would just stick that in the description, but I believe we didn't land on doing a comma, like male, comma, female into that field. We just stuck with leaving that into a description.
So this is one of those things where I prefer a comma because I can search for a symbol, but Herrick is right. Commas can be operators. I think they hate the word and because then people will do all sorts of weird stuff or put symbols or extra spaces. And then that makes me sad. And comma, people typically don't put double spaces on the comma.
There is another thing to bring up here though, which is
Oh, yes.
using the words staminate and pecculate or pistillate. And if we should look into doing that instead of using male and female, and we wanted some input from that. That's something that we were still kind of sifting through what the best option would be to do at the last meeting as well.
Well, it wouldn't apply to gymnosperms and ferns, though.
That's true.
So I found a paper and sent it to you three.
Okay.
There may be, I don't know how detailed, I was on the fringe of that, so I don't know how detailed the scoring is in that, but they actually, I mean, there's tons of stuff in here about some of the very things you've been talking about, like how people write reproductive condition, all the different ways. So there may be some really useful stuff in that paper so that we don't have to try to fight through some of these difficult decisions. They may have already come up with something.
Is that ontology, the plant ontology paper?
This is the phenology, scoring phenology.
Oh,
So do we think it's more complicated to do this for male or female, or do you want to split it up for the different types? You want to stick with it, or, well, Lorena had a good point. Lorena, you said your students preferred to do the staminate and the
well, that's how we teach them, right? But that, as Sam just said, that only applies to angiosperms.
Well, John Burns would argue that the term staminate Pistillate, referring to the sporophytes, and not to the gametophytes, which could technically be male and female. And since everybody's dealing with sporophytes, staminate or pistillate is probably the best.
Definitely changing it from.
Gymnosperms don't.
But this is an use.
Oh.
I don't, gymnosperms have staminate,
What?
staminate cones.
Well, yeah, but there's no pistil.
It's not the carpet.
They call them ovulate.
Yeah, they put over the.
Oh, yeah, another word.
Except. That's a new word.
Additionally,
Botany
we
doesn't have enough words.
choose
Oh,
to
okay.
replace, what the collector has said. We are kind of deviating from other, standards we created, such as keeping the verbatim,
Yeah.
which is another thing to consider. So establishment means we very, very, very rarely see this. You can see the Darwin core right there where it's saying the state of establishment at the time of collection. So cultivated, invasive, native. There is already on the Form A checkbox for cultivated. We personally do not find this as necessary of a field for us, since this is already really represented. So the question is, do we need to duplicate this information? Is that important to have again under establishments?
There's that, and also invasive or native, that's on a taxon. So I'm not exactly sure how this came into Darwin core. But we were thinking that that needs to be left to the taxon level and that cultivated doesn't need to be duplicated, so it's not
Well,
really used by us.
establishment means could also apply to things that have been introduced that are, like escaped from cultivation, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or,
There's also often uncertainty that we find things in, behind a botanical garden, and we're not really sure. It's like, or an old homestead. We're not-
Yeah,
Right.
where we have those jonquils that's there for decades after the house is gone,
yeah,
but didn't move.
right.
Well, and I think we also have to take the long view that something that, like, calorie pear, right? 50 years ago, it was cultivated, and now it's goddamn everywhere, right? So if you label something as, this taxa is this, well, you're gonna be wrong, because you're gonna plants.
It's just too big of a question mark, I think. It's not something you can necessarily know unless.
Yeah, at the
you're
time it was
there.
collected, what was it?
Yes.
Was it cultivated? Was it escaped? Was it invasive?
I mean, there's some historical context to that, I
Yeah.
guess. But then you don't know the state of mind of the person who entered that originally, right?
Right.
Were they implying cultivation, or did they know for a fact that it was cultivated, for example? There's so much you could read into it that just makes this a very difficult, which is why y'all have it under the ambiguous category. right?
The same way you could say, all right, this is in a flower pot. Clearly it was put here on purpose.
Right.
And maybe a squirrel actually dropped that there and was a little jerk and screwed up your data.
Yeah, I think the guidance on the Darwin core standard is what is, adding to the ambiguity here, because it just says example cultivated invasive native, which is where we're asking if it's duplicative to check cultivated and then fill in this field. But I really think establishment means it's more like, population level type sort of thing, not necessarily that somebody stick this thing in the ground and naturally.
Yes, please continue using the captivated cultivated button. That is, we very much appreciate that. I've actually never seen it on a label. We were just going through all the fields. And I don't think, we didn't even find it.
I think we searched in multiple portals and maybe found one record with it mentioned, maybe. I mean, you could argue that you could argue that you read into it, like, okay, this would, when someone says like planted, like they very clearly, or it's from their own garden, they know they planted that there, then I guess that's something where you could append that, but even then.
So yes,
Oh, here's some other good examples there. Sorry, I'm just going through what they've got in the actual
Okay.
Darwin core standard. Introduced, assisted colonization, as in like if you're trying to reestablish rare, threatened, endangered population or something like that, perhaps,
oh,
vagrant, uncertain.
because there's nowhere other place to put introduced. So this would be a great place to put introduced. So if you were taking a specimen from an introduced population, then yes, then that would be a great place to put us for
That's actually super helpful for us population geneticists that are trying to track down. And I have to ask, all the people who were around 30, 40 years ago, who know all the little stories about where things were introduced or not.
A what if question that I've encountered, and I can't remember how we handle it in Cernak, but, there's been occasions where John has collected like a stackies or something and then cultivated it in his yard. And then made a specimen from the cultivated specimen.
Oh,
It's the location data.
Oh, location data is from where you collected it, which if it's in your yard, it's in your yard. And, I think we covered that, it shouldn't be put on the locality, and it should be a separate specimen if you are taking it from the wild and you want to report it in the wild, that's a separate record.
would you make a note though? But oftentimes it would be in the
Yeah,
like locality.
Yeah, that's what I put in
something.
locality, I'll put,
Known
cultivated plant,
from-
because I planted it and then I wanted to
The problem
make a
is,
specimen later.
the provenance is often important for conservation, like we have residents in Catawbiense is a great example of that specimen collected in what year?
Huh.
Late 1800s from Rocky Spur, but it was from a cultivated specimen in trial. You want to know the whole chain.
see, that would be good, well, my question then is that, is there an original specimen? And I'd say going forward, if you're gonna cultivate something, make sure that you have an original specimen and then the specimen from the cultivation. But definitely include that in the locality marks. But I think that, Herrick, I think we talked about this, technically speaking. It's, the location is the location where you pull that specimen from if it's cultivated. So if you pull something from the mountains, you're not gonna, but you grew it in Richland County, you're not gonna put Oconee.
No, yeah, because that's gonna add to like the sort of climate envelope kind of information, like where can this thing grow in the world? I think it's important to preserve the point where it came out of the ground, even though it may have been a cutting from something in the upstate or, halfway across the world or whatever.
Okay, but what if you saw it in the woods and it wasn't in flower? And so then you had to bring it back with you and grow it in your yard until it becomes in flower and you can identify it.
A lot of people have done this, John, Uncle Smallings to bring things back to the garden.
You put all that on your label.
Yeah, that goes into the notes.
Write a novel on your.
Exactly. I've seen specimens from South America where the label is 4 inches high, packed with a paragraph of information. And boy, was it helpful too.
Well, I think it's great that Lindsay's in the top, because this is something that would be, maybe that should be a separate tab, that should be or a separate field of where is its origin. Because, let me look this way, don't leave it off the label, the original location,
Yes.
leave it on the label, leave it on the record. The question is, if the cutting is from Oconee County, but you grew it in Richland County, what do you put in the county fields? I think what we're saying is that the
Where you
county
grew
should
it.
still be Richland County.
Yeah.
But you need to put all that information, location information, and maybe going forward, long term, we could have an added field. At some point where we have that, the original or origin location from.
Is there not already, isn't there already like a general notes field or something
Yes,
like that?
you can.
That would be the kind of place maybe that should go rather than creating another field.
Yes, and I like to tag them because it makes it easier finding it. So I would put like origin semicolon and then write it out.
Okay.
Because then you can find it easily in the download, because then you can just search for origin. So it's not necessarily fields, but you can still control F it in a download.
Because surely there's not gonna be a ton of those, right?
Yeah, there's not gonna be a lot.
So it doesn't make sense to add a field, I wouldn't think.
We had a bunch of azalea specimens, Coker collected. And here at the Coker Herbarium, at the Arboretum there in Hartsville, and he'd say where they came from.
My
Okay.
backyard.
No, usually it's collected 3 miles south of Hartsville.
Yeah.
Okay, where's that? 3 miles south.
Okay, so we'll move on from this, but for now, let's, okay, I like Ashley's point. For now, let's stick with, oh, go ahead.
I just have to say this. My favorite quote of Wade Batson in a really sweet little note he sent me when we discovered ore banking minor on the campus of Erskine College. Plants are where you find them, and they do get around. All this, all you groups like us need to go on and on about this, but it's really great.
I do love that quote. Yeah, I would leave it like in those last occurrence marks as Ashley said, and then put origin, some sort of like origin is, if you put origin, that's something easy to find. But we can type that up. For those of you who have not attended our meetings before, we do have a PowerPoint and a PDF that, Avery and I keep updated for people to be able to access. So don't worry, we will write this down. We will be furiously going back over the recording and taking notes. Okay, so datum. I wanted to bring this up, not because it is, ambiguous. It's ambiguous in the sense that what I have seen people do is that they get really excited if there's a datum on the label. And so they will, specifically the UTM, they will put the datum for the UTM into the datum field and then convert it to decimal lat and long. The datum corresponds to the decimal lat and long. So if you convert it, you've converted it to WIGS 84. So if there is a datum on the label next to coordinates, that goes into verbatim coordinates because that is part of the verbatim coordinates. When you convert it to WIGS 84, then the datum is WIGS 84. Datums don't change all that often. They have in the past. I highly encourage. I put WIGS 84 whenever I use WIGS 84 on my labels, just to be completionist. I don't know when the next datum is coming out or when they are going to be doing more work with that, but eventually they will. So it's nice to kind of sort of keep that if you are a collector to write WIGS 84, and if you're a data technician, if they provide that datum that goes into the verbatim coordinates. But yes, that's the biggest. And by the way, South Carolina, it's not that big of a deal, but yes, there is a difference between NAD 83 coordinates and WIGS 84. The closer you get to the poles, the bigger difference it can make. So for South Carolina specimens, yeah, you'll probably be a couple meters off. But it's important to indicate that. And there are converters online, and that is linked in our resources if you want to go all the way.
So if I'm using, the format thing in, Cernak for township and range, and it automatically does the conversion, it's taking that into account.
It's turning it into WIGS 84. I don't think it actually carries over the datum though. So that might need to be manually applied.
Yeah, if you do terms for range, it does.
It does? Oh, okay, good. Okay, I don't normally use that. Which comes to our, because South Carolina doesn't have that many.
Yeah.
I don't think I put it. Oh, I did. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and skip ahead because I didn't think this through. I apologize. Because I put datum and then I put read importance later. I'm sorry, Adri. So this field can be used as a calculator. However, what Avery and I have found is that it's very picky. And then the students struggle anyway. Which is okay, it happens. But also we do like to preserve the verbatim coordinates. So there's two different approaches to this. Either you can use that field as a calculator, or you can just put in the verbatim coordinates and use it as a calculator anyway. I do like the idea of having the verbatim coordinates put somewhere, either in the verbatim coordinates field or in the location remarks. And technically speaking, the field is defined as the coordinates as they appear on the label, and they should be added as they appear on the label. We also have been trying to get into the practice of saying, if there's no datum provided, there's no datum provided. Again, this comes back to where obviously a lot of times when you're just looking at one record, it's easy to forget because you're seeing the record and you're seeing the image itself. But more and more, this data is being sent to aggregators. So they're not comparing the record to the image. They're relying on the record to be representative of the image. So when you leave things off, it's not obvious if it got forgotten or if it wasn't actually filled in. So this is, up to the Herbaria. I really don't like it when there are verbatim coordinates and then somebody just puts them, or if there are verbatim coordinates and then somebody just puts the decimal lat and long and doesn't fill out verbatim coordinates, because that tells me how accurate it is. Like, did you georeference it or did the collector georeference it? So if there are coordinates provided, they need to be represented in some form or fashion true to how they appear on the label on the record. And it's up to you as the individual curator if you want to use that field as a calculator or if you want to use that field as it's intended as a verbatim coordinates field. But please indicate somewhere, because that tells us, who georeferenced it. Okay.
Well, and to point out, like, if you can also record georeferenced by.
Yes, and there is a georeferenced by, I apologize, which for some reason, doesn't always get filled out, but yes, if you are georeferencing, please fill out the georeferenced by. We always like to talk. This is online, and we also did a full recording of this. So I'm gonna go through this really quickly. What we have been doing is that we use locality as so first of all, we put anything and everything to do with location marks, even if it's repeated in habitat.
Okay.
And that's because sometimes you just read it and there's a string with a nice oh, it's just 4.5 miles west from this intersection. But then there's additional information that helps you actually find the population in the habitat, like something very important, like at the base of a waterfall, or on the east side of the trail, or on a steep slope. And that's not necessarily on the label, might not be right next to the location information. And that goes in habitat as well. But location information, we try to say this is everything and anything you can use to go back and relocate that specimen. Then there's locality formatting, which helps us, we're following hierarchy. And so basically it helps us find things quickly and sort. If you put the largest bound area first, then when you search on Cernak or when you download the data, you can very quickly find everything that is on Mount Mitchell, because it's the thing that comes up first. And then everything else follows it, so then you can create this grouping. This is not required. We're just showing you how we do it.
But won't it already find, if I search Mount Mitchell in Cernak, it will find everything that has Mount Mitchell in any text string.
It does, but then it gets nicely ordered, because then I can alphabetically order it, and then all the roads will pop up.
But you're gonna have. I'll say that at least in this case, I prefer the verbatim only,
Okay.
just because if I'm working with students, they're not gonna have any idea necessarily how to partition out those things that you want in a certain order, right? I was talking to Nick and Chloe about this during lunch, about how complicated it is to figure out what's locality, what's habitat, exactly like you're saying. So I think the simpler we can keep it for mass data entry seems like the ideal situation.
Yes, and I am so sorry. I'm so glad you brought that up. What I forgot to mention was, this is typically the georeferencer who does this.
Okay,
So there are different workflows, and so the person who's doing the georeferencing, if the verbatim of how it appears needs to be in the locality string, because that is how we find duplicates.
okay,
Not duplicates as in like duplicate specimens, but as in duplicate locations.
right,
So
Okay.
we try to maintain, we try to maintain in parentheses, like even though for this record, we updated it, like the georeferencer went through and put that it's in this national forest first, it's in this district, it's in this compartment, it's on this park road, and broke it down. The original one is still here, because now that we georeferenced it, somebody else can search for that exact string for other species found in the same exact location and grab those coordinates that we found. But it is 100%, you're completely right. As far as like quick entry or, somebody who was just learning, put it in verbatim, because somebody else who's georeferencing and has the experience can mess with that. We're gonna go to that. So these are the fields that we do not use at this time. Okay. Okay. So you guys heard Michael talk today earlier about Notes from Nature projects. We were trying to do this last year, but we had a lot going on. So we are trying to do it this year. We want to launch a Notes from Nature project to attack records in South Carolina that lack enough information to figure out if it has any duplicates. Then grab all of those specimen images, push them into Notes from Nature, and only get those fields filled in so that we can then identify the duplicates. So we'll be looking for any specimen records that lack any of the following: collector name, collector number, collection date, and county. Then we will get permission from you guys to use those images. We will push them online in batches of 2,000. It takes roughly 3 months per batch, depending on our engagement. And then we can feed the results back to help you guys identify your unicates. So the results of this, what we hope to get are duplicates, so exact matches based on collector number. There will be the unicates, so unique specimen based on the collector number, or information, or records that need more research. So why would we do this? So we went around earlier this morning and people, we were talking about how many specimens does each collection have? So I think USDH right now is the largest, over 130,000. How many does Clemson have?
Angiosperms, we have 85. I don't know. Yeah, angiosperms and, well, but it is Cernic, 85.
Yes, and so then there are smaller herbaria of 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 specimens. So if you identify the duplicates first, there's a good chance a larger herbarium, since, especially Dr. Nelson specimens, or NCU has processed a lot because they've done a lot of digitization, might have already filled in the information for that duplicate. There's no reason for a smaller herbarium with smaller resources to duplicate those efforts. You can pull that in with the duplicate search tool and focus on your unique specimens. that nobody else can help you with because it's physically in your herbarium. So that's the idea. And then you can, and so this helps us do all sorts of stuff. It can help with georeferencing. And making it easier because you can follow, as Eric mentioned, where someone went. So just even having that information up there starts to shed more light. And you can engage history and library sciences with herbarium data through binomia, because then you can start looking at the collectors and the collector names and how they wrote it different. And so shining a light on dark data. First of all, it tells us it's finding the exact number of occurrences of these populations of these plants in South Carolina. We're finding new data for attract or endangered species because they may be, they just may not be popping up. Improving data quality in the collections, and it's improving georeferencing. So I'm going to hand it over to Avery because she has experience with the Notes from Nature project.
I think Michael talked about this a little bit more earlier. I do want to note that when we said the 3 months for a grouping of about 2,000 specimens, it's just based off of what we just experienced with our Notes from Nature project. I don't remember the exact number, but it was around 2,000, right, Eric?
Yes.
It took just about 3 months to get through that, so it's variable.
Did you guys advertise that out of curiosity?
So it would be on Notes for Nature and where you could go to, ours would be under the Cernic, like to the southeast.
But you didn't do a
Yeah.
big push to attract people to it.
Yes,
You did, okay.
Social media.
Yeah.
Notes from Nature has its own Facebook,
Okay.
Twitter, whatever you call it. And so they'll pitch it as, hey, we've got a new project for you guys to work on.
Okay.
And then we used our own Herbarium platform, social media platform to pitch it as well. I also reached out to some folks with Native Plant Society to let them know about it.
Okay.
But what I think we need as a group is, maybe we need, next time we push something big like this, is to ask if we can talk at one of the chapter meetings or something to kind of let them know how it'll all work. And I think if we get engagement from folks like that, we might be able to do it in less than 3 months.
Right.
I haven't had a chance to look and see what it's, how clean it is.
Well, in the last iteration, we went from images to data. So I don't know how clean that, I don't have a slate to compare it to, you know what I'm saying? It's blank. But the other thing that happens with this, and it'll be more for whoever kind of manages the Notes from Nature project, is the folks in there are tenacious.
Yes, they are.
They will ask you all kinds of questions and you will learn so much more about your specimens than you ever wanted to know. Because they will dissect every little minute detail that's in there and question it.
So like Michael talked about earlier, they already have their own tutorial, which you can see part of up here, that basically goes through the same skeletal fields that we do. And we did have some differences on how we wanted our data transcribed, hence the collector number not having the comma because of the concern on how the search engine works on Cernic with that. So he was gracious enough to allow us to upload our own PDF of our data standards, and the volunteers are actually very flexible about kind of code switching with that and using different rules for different projects. So that ours are on there too. They also even have discussion boards here where people will ask questions, and then many people, usually a lot of the moderator ones, will help answer. They put their own tips, they put their own website that they use, that kind of thing. And you can be listed yourself as researcher, moderator on that, get notifications when someone leaves a comment on part of your project, and you can reply to it easily.
And I'll point out too, they'll tag certain images, like if there's a trend where, like, say something's cropped and you can't read the whole label, they'll tag it so that a whole group of them are easily discoverable.
And you could easily sort through them and kind of look at those and maybe go back and be like, all right, well, we got the information we needed, hopefully. It's something that you can then also put into your own queue for, let's re-image this so we have a more complete image. So it helps with that kind of data too.
So I have a question about that. I did, and I think Herrick may have helped me set this up, but I did 2 expeditions for a forest ecology class. It's like a magnolia one, and then I forget what the other one was, but I was doing it just for the class, but I had people from other places who wanted to jump in on it. And I was getting notifications about comments and questions. And so my question for you guys is, how are we supposed to manage that? Because I don't have time. If you're doing a big one, you're gonna get a lot. That was only several hundred specimens in that expedition. If you're doing batches of 2K, you're gonna have potentially lots of comments and questions. And my understanding is if you don't respond to those, then your engagement can drop. So the more you engage with your audience, the more likely they are to help you out. So how are y'all thinking about dealing with that?
I will admit, it is a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I've had some gentle panic opening my email and seeing 50 notifications overnight. Me and Herrick have done our best to try to balance it between us by that we both get notified. However, even for things that maybe we don't see immediately because these are people from anywhere and everywhere and transcribing when I am asleep at 2 a.m. perhaps. There are moderators and common users on there that are also available and will commonly reply to these things. There are many times I have gone to open a question and it's already been addressed by someone else within the network, essentially. So it can go either way. I think if you can kind of divide and conquer, it's helpful, but there are actually some people on there that are helpful in their own way without being asked and just nice, good Samaritans, honestly.
And also, we're anticipating a lot less questions on this because this is just the skeletal data. This is not.
That's all ours was.
Well, I was hoping that
People have lots to say
They do.
about everything.
Some of it's not questions either, you know,
Right.
but
Yes.
some of it's just general interest, which is nice to see the engagement, but yeah, there is a lot. I did notice a reduction in the number of questions we got or things that needed to be addressed after we uploaded our own personal tutorial and PDFs of it. So that then people were more easily, it was more accessible for them to see, this is how ours go. And especially for collections that come from like, or specifically from our institution, like something like Dr. Nelson's popping up. And they get used to seeing certain collectors, certain ways that labels are written, that kind of thing. And I think it just gets easier and easier for them, but especially if you upload your own resources on how you transcribe data yourself.
And Avery and I have been working really hard on these skeletal data standards and providing a lot of examples.
Okay.
Not just like one. I mean, we try to isolate all the edge cases as well so that it's very, very easy. They can click on that PDF and then there's a whole list. I mean, I think our full document is, I want to say, well over 150 pages. And
I think in our slideshow, it was around 250, approaching 300 slides. We also did video examples, that kind of thing. It's a task. It's a really big task, but in the long run, it has been very, very helpful. Especially once you have these resources, even if you're not going for 300 slides. If you have just a baseline of at least your skeletal data, it doesn't mean that just it can apply to notes for nature. You can use that for volunteers in your herbarium as well, and it really helps streamline the whole process.
And we are trying to get that, we're working with our graphics group to get that printed in the booklet instead of just a pamphlet that we're handing out today. That has just, I mean, I'm talking about pages of examples and edge cases.
They also
So-
love if you index it so they can just hyperlink to any problem they have.
One more potential strategy with the notes from nature thing and, in Arkansas, they were able to work with Michael Denslow to get, the project sort of privatized almost so that their data coordinator actually would train Native Plant Society volunteers in Arkansas. So they knew exactly what the standards were. There was like cuts down on all the questions up front. So, if we can coordinate something like that, that'd be great, but,
I am going to kind of jump over this graphic because Michael already used his own example where you saw like username here. This is just for one record that was transcribed by 3 different users. And in this instance, they're all green because they had unanimous matches or at least a 2 out of 3 record match, which was enough for it to append to the field. That's right, isn't it, Eric? It just takes 2 out of 3. It's not. It takes 3 to make it fully append, but it's 2. 2 is okay as well.
two can, 2/3 will, work.
We're running short on time, but, in this vein of wanting to upload the data, we are going to pass around a sheet. If you guys would like to sign it to have permission to upload specimens from your herbarium online to have them transcribed by volunteers as well on notes for amateur.
That is going to be digital, because I cannot find that sheet. But real quick, that I did want to point out to you for all the curators who have not been to our meetings before. What? It is under vegetarian, right? We have a full 33-minute video presentation of the standards and how to for volunteers. So if you have volunteers in your herbarium and you're like, oh my goodness, now I have to train them. Avery and I put this together. We will update it periodically, but you guys can use it for training. Please go forth. We encourage you to use it because we have trained so many volunteers. Having a video that we can show new people and not having to repeat ourselves over and over makes us happy. It makes them happy. And then there is also a fully indexed PDF, which we hope to update soon. But it's correct for now, but we want to add more fields. You can literally be like, I don't remember what the rules are for identification qualifier. And then you click over there and it's got descriptions, explanations. And so you can return to the field list and go back. So this is online on herbarium.org. You can use this for training purposes. Especially with a smaller herbarium, we have small staff. We feel your pain. We've been there. We've trained so many student volunteers. And they want so badly to learn. And now here it is written down.
We also have, if you've missed any of our South Carolina herbarium meetings, any of those past ones, we do have recordings of all of them also available on the website. They link to the Herbarium YouTube page. Oh, yes.
I just want to salute your enthusiasm and energy and force because all of these tools really help and I have been able to share them with my students. So contact everyone. That is
terrific.
And the next thing, I guess, well, okay, I can't bring it back up, but we have 4 minutes left. What are some questions? I mean, there are students here, there are curators here. We want to have these meetings periodically. I think we typically do one like right before school starts, after the semester ends, right before the semester starts and after the semester ends. What do you guys want to talk about in these meetings? Do you guys have something pressing that you want to discuss? We can invite Michael Denslow for one of the meetings.
We're not strictly referring to just in person in this format either. We're also, we're talking more about digital because this is a big whole thing, which is great, but this is the first time we've actually done in person. So mainly our meetings just occur online on Zoom.
Y'all mentioned that at the beginning that you could help with imaging strategies and setup and all of that. And that has changed dramatically since the Cernek days. And so I think it would be really helpful for those of us who fell under the Cernek umbrella that now don't have any equipment to do imaging with, and what does that look like today and that kind of thing. That might be a good session to have.
I second the motion. Yeah.
Presentation up here actually, while back, so it might not be as, it's not as thorough as all of our references. And I will find that I need to upload the PowerPoint as well, which has the actual videos on it. This is specific to our light box, but
They
it
don't make that
also,
box anymore.
well, sorry.
That's what I'm saying. That's what we had for Cernak, and I don't think they make that box anymore.
Companies that-
Because when I was at MTSU, right before I left, I bought a box from or Terry or something like that,
Order.
that was suggested to me by Katie. And that was 6 years ago, 5 years ago. So that's probably not a thing anymore.
George, that's, yeah, it was a complicated name at Tex.
Oh, yeah.
He
Yeah,
had some
so
pretty good, recommendations. There are actually some fairly cheap, like light box, setups you get off of Amazon.
Okay.
But I would still, recommend going with the similar sort of camera setup you can get,
Well, it might be worth a meeting,
Yeah,
one of the
yeah.
videos.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
I was gonna add, you did find a similar light box to the original light box. I can't remember right now, got it on my Excel sheet on my computer. So if anyone wants to know where to find that magical looking device, just let me know and I can force you my computer. You remember, continue to get, or I took an odd, and I did find one that's not exactly the same. It's pretty similar.
You remember how much it costs?
Reappropriated.
A lot. I can't remember the exact number.
Sulky hatching for a while, it's going over to Earth again.
Around 2,000.
That's about what they cost, because I bought them for Tennessee.
Just the box and the camera.
So so imaging and Lightbox, okay. I just did, I think Chloe's here. Do you referencing workshops specifically for South Carolina? How to use, just like a quick start on QGIS, because that's free. Which is, we are always happy when Herbaria take it upon themselves to georeference. And then definitely some review of some of these things that we want to talk about and the ambiguous fields, but we ran out of time. But speaking of running out of time, go ahead, Carolyn.
I just got a quick question. Harvey Ballard came to NCU about a month ago and went through all of our violets for North Carolina and Virginia and like changed all of them. Which is wonderful, and you know. The more I learn about violets, I realize the less I know about violets. He's gonna come back next year and go through the rest of the southeast. Is that the kind of thing that I should give you a heads up, like there's gonna be massive changes in our violet